So, the target is a human? The younger mercenary looked at his superior with incredulity. The silence that followed the assassin's statement felt like an eternity, broken only by the soft clinking of glass as the bartender refilled their drinks. No, I heard what you said, the younger mercenary stammered, still trying to process what he had just been told. It's just, no, there's no way anyone could be that insanely stupid. The older assassin didn't respond right away. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his alien features unreadable in the dim light of the bar. The mandibles on his face clicked together softly, a sign of irritation, though the younger mercenary couldn't be sure if it was directed at him or something else entirely. I was led to believe, the mercenary continued, now more uncertain, that the Black Hand assassins could take out anyone, anywhere, that no contract was too dangerous. The older assassin's expression darkened. His mandibles clicked again, this time more forcefully. Don't mention that name here, he growled. We don't use it anymore, not after what happened with the Delpin Empire. The mercenary raised an eyebrow. Intrigued despite himself? The Delpin Empire. He had heard of them. Of course, everyone had. But the way the assassin spoke made it sound like there was a story behind it. Something deeper and darker than what most knew. I don't care about the Delpin or any other empire, the mercenary said, trying to regain control of the conversation. What I care about is you fulfilling this contract. I want you to kill a human. The assassin's mandibles clicked loudly in agitation, and his eyes narrowed. We don't take contracts to kill humans. The younger mercenary leaned forward, his tone challenging. Then I'll just find someone else. The assassin's response was immediate and blunt. You can try, but you won't find anyone else. Not in any guild worth their salt, and certainly not in the entire galaxy. You might find some reckless freelancer with a death wish, but I guarantee you they won't finish the job. Either they'll die trying, or they'll sell you out the first chance they get. The mercenary scoffed, though there was a hint of unease in his voice. You're seriously telling me that humans are unkillable? The assassin's eyes gleamed with something resembling amusement, though it was hard to tell. I never said they were unkillable. Quite the opposite. Actually, I know for a fact that humans are very much mortal, but we don't take contracts to kill them. The mercenary's frustration boiled over. Why not? Why in all the hells would you refuse? The assassin leaned forward, his tone dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. Because the only way to kill a human and live long enough to enjoy the money is to drop a neutron bomb on them from orbit, just to be sure. And after that, you'd better grab the fastest ship you can find and get as far away from human space as possible, preferably to another galaxy. The mercenary stared, his disbelief growing with every word. You're joking. Well, the assassin's mandibles clicked again, this time in a way that made the younger mercenary uneasy. Tell me, the assassin said, his tone suddenly conversational. Does your planet have compulsory education? What does that have to do with anything? The mercenary snapped, caught off guard by the sudden shift in topic. Just humor me, the assassin said, waving a hand dismissively. Does it? The mercenary frowned, but answered, yes, 10 years of basic education, mostly teaching us how to be obedient citizens. The assassin nodded, his expression unreadable. That sounds about right. Did they teach you any history? A little, the mercenary admitted. Mostly about our own planet. Though, why? They must not have taught you much galactic history, the assassin said with a sigh, leaning back in his chair. So let me enlighten you. The bartender came over with fresh drinks, and the assassin took a long sip before continuing. Do you remember the Delpin Empire? The mercenary nodded. Of course. They used to rule half the galaxy before they fell. Everyone knows that. The assassin's eyes gleamed with something that might have been nostalgia, or perhaps bitterness. Do you know what happened to them? How they fell? The mercenary shrugged. I heard they tried to conquer some world, and it went badly for them. The assassin smiled, though it was a cold, dangerous smile. That's an understatement. But yes, you're technically right. The Delpin Empire poured all their resources into trying to conquer a planet. But it wasn't just any planet. It was a death world. The mercenary leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. A death world? The assassin nodded. A world where the environment itself is hostile to life. A place where even the most basic survival is a daily struggle. And that world, the one that broke the Delpin Empire, was the cradle world of the humans. The mercenary blinked in surprise. Wait, Earth? The humans' home planet? Exactly, the assassin said, taking another sip of his drink. And it wasn't the planet that broke the Delpin. It was the humans. The mercenary frowned, trying to process what he was hearing. How? How did a bunch of pre-spaceflight primitives break an empire like the Delpin? The assassin chuckled darkly. Let me tell you a story. He leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant as he began to recount the tale. The Delpin Empire once ruled this half of the galaxy. Hundreds of species, hundreds of civilizations, all under their thumb. Some served willingly, others were crushed into submission. The Delpin war machine was unstoppable, or at least that's what everyone thought at the time. They would move from system to system, conquering worlds and adding them to their empire in the galaxy. For the most part, just let them do it. The mercenary listened, fascinated despite himself. He had heard stories about the Delpin before, but never in such detail. They were relentless, the assassin continued. The council of species that governed the part of the galaxy that wasn't under Delpin control was powerless to stop them. They would posture, they would negotiate, but in the end, nothing they did could slow the Delpin's advance. The galaxy was falling, one system at a time. The assassin's expression darkened. Then, one day, the Delpin came across a system they hadn't seen before, a small, unassuming star system. With a handful of planets orbiting it, the inhabitants of that system called it Sol. The mercenary nodded. He had heard of the Sol system before, though it was a minor blip on the galactic map these days. The Delpin, being the conquerors they were, decided to add this system to their empire, the assassin said, and the third planet from the sun, Earth, was their target. The humans lived there, and they had just started to explore their own solar system. They were divided into various factions they called nations, which made the Delpin's job even easier. Divided species are easier to conquer. The mercenary couldn't help but scoff. So what happened? The Delpin took over, right? They thought they had, the assassin said with a grim smile. The humans resisted, of course, but the Delpin were a vast, technologically superior force. In a matter of weeks, they had taken control of the planet, or so they thought. The mercenary frowned. But you said the humans broke them. Oh, they did, the assassin replied, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of respect and fear. You see, the humans didn't fight like most species. Most species, when conquered, would resist for a while, but eventually they'd give up, they'd fall in line, and life would go on under their new overlords. But the humans, they didn't play by the same rules. The assassin leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. For 20 years, the humans bided their time. They worked, they lived, they bred. The Delpin thought they had broken them, but in reality, the humans were preparing. The mercenary's eyes widened. Preparing for what? For war, the assassin said simply. While the Delpin war machine was off conquering other systems, the humans were gathering strength. They reverse-engineered Delpin technology, trained in secret, and when the time was right, they struck. The mercenary leaned forward, captivated by the story. What did they do? It started small, the assassin said. A mine refused to work. A rancher claimed his livestock had been wiped out by disease, but soon the resistance grew. Entire nations rose up against their Delpin overlords. Factories exploded, supply lines were cut, and Delpin patrols started disappearing. The assassin's eyes narrowed. The Delpin were caught completely off guard. They had grown complacent, thinking the humans were just another conquered species. They didn't realize that the humans had been planning this rebellion for years. The mercenary was silent, hanging on the assassin's every word. The humans fought like demons, the assassin continued. They sabotaged Delpin equipment, ambushed their troops, and used every dirty trick in the book to weaken the Delpin forces. And it wasn't just on Earth. The rebellion spread to every human colony, every outpost. The Delpin were being attacked on all fronts, and they couldn't keep up. The mercenary could hardly believe what he was hearing. And they won? The assassin nodded. They did. In the end, the Delpin were forced to retreat from human space. They left behind entire fleets, entire armies, all destroyed by the humans. And it wasn't just a military victory. The Delpin Empire was crippled. Their economy collapsed, their leadership was in shambles, and the other species they had conquered saw the humans' success and started their own rebellions. The assassin took a long sip of his drink, his expression somber. The Delpin Empire fell because they underestimated the humans, and they weren't the only ones. Since then, no one has dared to take on humanity directly, not even the Black Hand. The mercenary was silent for a long moment, trying to process everything he had just heard. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet. So you're saying humans are too dangerous to kill? The assassin nodded. Exactly. Killing a human is like kicking a hornet's nest. You might succeed, but the consequences will follow you for the rest of your life. No amount of money is worth that. The mercenary leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had come here to hire the best assassin in the galaxy, but now he was starting to realize just how little he understood about the galaxy and the humans who lived in it.